Are there any objections to the agenda? The agenda is adopted. Thank you. Dear friends, I want to start by giving a heartfelt thanks to our gracious host here in Bucharest and the International Secretariat for putting this event together. We gather not only in this beautiful city, in a beautiful country, but at the front lines of the starkest test for European security since the Helsinki Accords were adopted. It's truly an honor to be with you here in these trying times. This past year has been significant for this committee. In last year's annual session in Vancouver, we helped forge a declaration that broke significant ground. The Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine began its critical work, which stands as a powerful expression of this Assembly's unwavering support for Ukraine. Our work also demonstrated strong and united condemnation of the military aggression by Russia and Belarus, actions that are not only war crimes, but also fit the definition of genocide. We recall our efforts in supporting justice, such as the international investigations into Russia's atrocities and the push for a special tribunal to hold accountable those responsible. The destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam and the perilous attacks on nuclear facilities like Zaporizhzhia highlight the immense risks involved. Furthermore, Russia's withdrawal from pivotal nuclear treaties and its increased nuclear threats, including deploying weapons to Belarus, raised the stakes to dangerous levels. This is about more than Ukraine. It's a stand against a resurgence of Russian imperialism, which threatens those both inside and outside its borders, threatening global security and stability. Now more than ever, the work we do on this committee is absolutely vital. We're navigating a world fraught with political, economic, social, and technological upheaval. And let's not mince words. Russia's genocidal war against Ukraine is an outrageous affront to peace and stability. Since Russia's unprovoked invasion on February 24th, 2022, Ukraine has endured unimaginable suffering. Countless lives have been lost, millions displaced, and the resulting humanitarian crisis is staggering. Our resolve to support Ukraine remains unwavering. Through the efforts of this committee, the Parliamentary Support Committee for Ukraine, and our special representatives, we've been a vocal force for Ukraine. We need to continue supporting Ukraine to achieve victory, recover from this devastation, and ensure Russia's defeat. The principles of the Helsinki Final Act are our bedrock, and Russia's actions are a direct assault on all of these principles. We must ramp up our diplomatic, economic, and humanitarian support for Ukraine. It's also crucial that we pursue accountability for the atrocities committed during this conflict. We must support international efforts to document and then prosecute Russia's war crimes and crimes against humanity. Justice needs to be served, not just for the victims, but to uphold the international legal standards that are essential for global peace and security. Friends, Russia's aggression isn't confined to Ukraine. Russia's clear, gross, and uncorrected violations of its Helsinki and broader international obligations destabilizes the entire OSCE region and attacks global peace. Moldova is grappling with a hybrid war from Russia, including political meddling, energy blackmail, and disinformation. Transnistria remains a flashpoint, with pro-Russian leaders there echoing the strategies used in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia's creeping annexation of Belarus erodes its sovereignty, making it wholly dependent on Moscow. Armenia is also under pressure from Russian influence, affecting its political stability and undermining the democratic choices of its people. In Georgia, we're witnessing a worrying democratic backslide. The proposed law on transparency of foreign influence, which mirrors Russia's authoritarian legislation, is alarming. It signals Russia-supported efforts to undermine Georgia's democracy and its aspirations for Euro-Atlantic integration. We must not ignore the Georgian people's powerful stand for democracy. They must be supported. Our committee must also keep an eye on regions beyond the OSCE. The Middle East, for instance, presents complex and sensitive challenges. We must affirm Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism and threats to its sovereignty. We must also be wary of the malign influence that China seeks to assert in Europe and Eurasia. Dear friends, as parliamentarians, our primary duty is to serve the people who elected us. In these tumultuous times, the OSCE EPA is a crucial platform for debate and dialogue. It allows us to voice our constituents' interests, acknowledge conflicts, and devise practical political solutions. Let's reaffirm our commitment to the mission and principles of this institution, driven by the urgency to serve those who rely on us during these perilous times. Our discussions and decisions here are far from mere formalities. They shape the future of our nations. By fostering collaboration and understanding, we can tackle the root causes of conflicts and strive towards a sustainable peace. We need to face challenges head on and present a unified front against threats to our shared values and security. By doing so, we honor the trust that was placed in us by our citizens, who look to us for leadership and they look to us for hope. We must endeavor to be their voice on the international stage, ensuring their dreams for a peaceful and prosperous future are realized. Our unwavering commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law must guide every action we take. In closing, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to my fellow committee officers. It's been a pleasure working with Vice Chairman Costel Dunava, who has been an able partner and indeed has become a trusted friend. I also want to acknowledge our former Rapporteur, Lorenas Kashunas, who has been a clear and powerful voice for justice and freedom. I also want to thank Tobias Winkler, who has graciously stepped in as Rapporteur after Mr. Kashunas was appointed as Minister of Defense in Lithuania. Tobias has prepared outstanding and thorough documents that will be the foundation of our work here this week. Tobias, thank you for your dedication and readiness to contribute to our committee's efforts. We're all looking forward to hearing from you shortly. Finally, thank you to all of you for your commitment, for being here, and your willingness to engage in this crucial work during these most challenging times. I look forward to our discussions and exchanges in the days ahead. Thank you. The committee is scheduled to have 4 meetings during this session. Our first task will be to debate the report by our Rapporteur, Mr. Tobias Winkler, entitled The Role of the OSCE in Current Security Architecture, a Parliamentary Perspective. We will also consider amendments on his draft resolution. Time permitting, we will start that process today. We have 22 amendments tabled to the draft resolution, which are available outside the room on the documents table, as well as on the app. In addition, this committee has been tasked by the Standing Committee to debate and consider 4 supplementary items covering the following issues. The first, countering the proliferation of drugs, particularly fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, as well as mafias and criminal organizations involved in trafficking them, proposed by Mr. Zoffili from Italy. Second, condemning the weaponization of sexual violence in conflict zones, proposed by Ms. Campione from Italy. Third is building a comprehensive European security architecture against aggression, proposed by Mr. Wilson from the United States. And finally, strengthening the support for Ukraine, proposed by Mr. Paris from France. Amendments have been tabled to these supplementary items, and they are available in the usual way. We will consider the supplementary items when our main business on the draft resolution is concluded. May I remind colleagues that the election of committee officers for the next annual session of the Assembly will take place during the committee's final session, which is likely to take place on Tuesday morning. I've been asked to put before the committee a proposal by the Secretariat for a change to the deadline for candidate nominations. This is to allow sufficient time for the arrangements for the election to be made ahead of our meeting on Tuesday. The same proposal is being put to all general committees. Under Rule 36, Paragraph 5, the Secretariat would like to ask the committee to agree the deadline for nominations for the committee officers shall be 6 p.m. on Monday, the 1st of July. This is to allow sufficient time for the arrangements for elections to be made ahead of our meeting on Tuesday morning. Are there any objections to this change? The proposal then is adopted. Thank you. I would now like to welcome to the floor Mr. Tobias Winkler to present his report and draft resolution to this committee. It would assist me greatly if any member wishing to speak during the debate could enter his or her name in the register as early as possible in this debate. Mr. Winkler, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to stand before you today, the first time as the rapporteur of the First General Committee on Political Affairs and Security of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. This annual session in Bucharest comes at a time when our commitment to collective security and cooperation is more crucial than ever. First, I would like to thank all of you for the confidence and to entrust me at interim with the office of the rapporteur of the First Committee. Special thanks to President Pia Kauma, my fellow colleagues in the committee, Congressman Richard Hudson and Kostel Nikolai Dunaver, and Secretary General Roberto Montella. I would also like to express gratitude to Mr. Laurinas Kasciunas, who had to leave office as he became Minister of Defense in Lithuania. Good luck for this important role. His work and contributions in the past several months were the foundation of the draft report and the draft resolution. Both documents reflect the ideas my predecessor presented during our winter meeting in Vienna and build upon the discussions and the committee members had there together with the key stakeholders from the OSCE executive branch. Today, I want to address several issues encapsulated in the draft resolution of our committee, focusing particularly on support of Ukraine, accountability for violations of international law, strengthening the OSCE PA's role in conflict resolution, and combating disinformation and hybrid threats. Foremost in our discussion on the ongoing situation in Ukraine, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine remain paramount. We observe that the situation is dramatically deteriorating in Ukraine. The report details the catastrophic impacts of civilian lives and infrastructure, highlighting the urgent need for a robust and sustainable international response to support Ukraine and uphold the rule of law. It underscores the importance of international accountability mechanisms and the OSCE's own initiatives in documenting and prosecuting war crimes, thus calling for enhanced support and solidarity with Ukraine from the OSCE member states. The OSCE is confronted with the necessity of a firm and united stance against violations of international law. The draft resolution condemns the action of the Russian Federation and its allies, detailing their breaches of the international rules-based order and their impacts on regional stability. It calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and full accountability for atrocities committed, advocating for vigorous support for Ukraine, including military, humanitarian, and financial assistance. It's essential to restore peace and ensure the country's sovereignty. Our collective response must be unwavering and unified. Our assistance as parliamentarians of OSCE member countries is not merely a gesture of goodwill, but a fundamental obligation under the international law as reaffirmed in the Helsinki Final Act. Accountability for the violation of international law is another cornerstone of the draft resolution, as Richard Hudson already mentioned. We must hold those responsible for aggression and war crimes accountable. The international community cannot stand idly by while the principles of the United Nations Charter and the Helsinki Final Act are flagrantly violated. This accountability is not about retribution, but about upholding the rule of law and deterring future violations. I myself was born in Nuremberg, the city of the Nuremberg trials, the world's first war crimes tribunal, held in the famous courtroom 600, the Schwurgerichtssaal in Nuremberg, dealt with the atrocities committed by leading Nazis, underlining the necessity to hold accountable those who violate our international rules-based order. I was thus particularly honored to enable and welcome a field hearing under the leadership of our friend and from United States, South Carolina, Honorable Congressman Joe Wilson. With experts, we discussed the accountability of war crimes at this historic place earlier this year. It was a field hearing with members of both the US Senate and the House of Representatives. Dear colleagues, the report and draft resolution also touch upon the increasing tensions and conflicts of the OSCE area and beyond. For example, on the situation in the Middle East, which is closely linked to security in the OSCE area. We strongly condemn the terrorist attack of 7th October by Hamas and the Iranian massive airstrike on 14th of April, expressing concerns over the escalation of the situation in the region, significantly increasing the number of civilian casualties and the situation with hostages. The resolution calls for the expansion of humanitarian aid flows into Gaza, which needs to be supported and facilitated safely to ensure that all those in need benefit from it. The report and resolution also highlight important developments in Moldova and Transnistria, expressing the Assembly's commitment to reaching a comprehensive, peaceful, and lasting political settlement of the Transnistrian conflict, supporting Moldova's European Union accession negotiations and emphasizing the important work carried out by the OSCE mission in Moldova, which, in the absence of the possibility to hold 5+2 talks, plays an important role in facilitating dialogue and negotiations in the 1+1 format. The situation in the South Caucasus is also a focus of the documents, marking important steps towards concluding comprehensive and sustainable peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan, expressing concerns over the lack of progress in resolving the Russian occupation of Georgia's Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and supporting the work carried out by the Special Representative Kari Henriksen. Dear friends, despite all conflicts on the ground, in the digital age, disinformation and hybrid threats pose significant challenges to our security. The proliferation of false information undermines public trust, destabilizes societies, and erodes democratic processes. Our strategy to combat these threats includes robust cyber defenses, media literacy programs, and international cooperation. Parliaments must legislate to enhance cybersecurity, promote transparency in information dissemination, and foster collaboration to counter these threats efficiently. The OSCE faces significant institutional challenges as well, including issues with the appointment of key positions and the adoption of a unified budget. These challenges undermine our effectiveness. We must reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism and the core principles of cooperation, dialogue, and mutual respect. It is imperative to overcome these hurdles to maintain the OSCE's capacities to address regional security challenges effectively. Strengthening the role of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in mediating and resolving conflicts is another pivotal aspect of our draft resolution. The OSCE PA, with its diverse membership and parliamentary diplomacy, is uniquely positioned to facilitate dialogue and foster peaceful resolutions. We must enhance our capacity to act swiftly and decisively in conflict situations. This requires not only political, but also adequate financial resources and institutional support. Our parliaments must advocate for increased funding and capacity building for the OSCE PA, ensuring it can effectively fulfill its mandate. Dear colleagues, the role of parliaments in implementing these goals cannot be overstated. As lawmakers, We are at the forefront of shaping policies and ensuring their execution. We must work collaboratively, transcending political differences to safeguard our shared values and security. We must encourage wider cooperation with parliamentary bodies and the OSCE EPA. Collaboration with other international organizations, regional bodies, and civil society is essential for a comprehensive approach to security. By fostering partnerships and sharing best practices, we can address security challenges effectively. The challenges we face are significant, but so are the opportunities for collaboration and progress. I sincerely hope that the draft resolution of the first committee can provide us with a roadmap for reaffirming our commitments and jointly addressing these challenges. By supporting Ukraine, ensuring accountability, combating disinformation, building resilient democratic institutions, and strengthening the OSCE and the OSCE EPA, we can build a more secure and resilient future, our main obligation and promise to the peoples in the 50th year after the signing of the Helsinki Final Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler, for that excellent report. The floor is now open for debate. The time limit for speeches is 3 minutes. If there are a number of members wishing to speak, I may reduce the time limit further to try to accommodate as many people as possible. As been my practice, I will first give the floor to my colleague and friend, Mr. Dunava, who will be followed by Dr. de Ritter from Germany. Mr. Dunava, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the rapporteur, Mr. Tobias Winkler, for such a comprehensive work in elaborating the draft resolution. As the rapporteur points out, Russia's ongoing, unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, with the Belarus complicity, is a threat to European and global security and stability, and a human tragedy. The aggression is taking an enormous toll on the civilian population, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable children. When they do not fall victims to the missile attacks, many children are illegally deported to Russia for forced adoption and are targets for actions aimed at erasing their Ukrainian identity. These actions are a stark violation of all values upon which the OSCE human dimension is built. We are also appealed by the independent reports inter alia those of OSCE ODIHR and under the OSCE Moscow mechanism, which have found serious violations of human rights and clear patterns of violations of international humanitarian law by Russian forces in Ukraine. All those responsible for crimes in Ukraine should and will be brought to justice. This is our collective responsibility and the legitimate demand of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. The OSCE plays an important role in documenting violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law through ODIHR reports and those under the Moscow mechanism, thus contributing to an accountability mechanism. The work, mandates, and institutional independence of OSCE autonomous institutions are essential to the promotion and advancement of democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedoms and the rule of law in our region. We should focus on this important mission and, as parliamentarians, we should advocate for the OSCE, its principles and commitments towards government and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Dr. de Ritter to be followed by Mr. Pocherayev. Dr. de Ritter, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender, vielen Dank für die Worterteilung. Sehr geehrter Herr Rapporteur Tobias Winkler, ich freue mich. Mikro ist an. Ich freue mich sehr, dass Sie diese Position übernommen haben. Ich danke für den Bericht, aber auch für die dahinterliegende Arbeit. Und es ist ganz wichtig, dass wir nach wie vor diesen Aggressionskrieg Russlands gegen die Ukraine verurteilen. Ich glaube, da gibt es gar keinen Zweifel. Ebenso ist es wichtig, und das betont ja Ihr Bericht, dass der 10-Punkte-Plan von Präsident Zelensky jede Form der Unterstützung benötigt, dass allerdings auch Öffnungen in den Verhandlungen eine Rolle spielen müssen. Ich verlasse mich nach wie vor auf die OSZE, weil ich weiß, dass wir eine wichtige Moderatorenrolle haben. Wir können hier als Facilitator agieren, insbesondere mit Blick auf das kommende Jahr, wo wir 50 Jahre Helsinki und den Spirit von Helsinki feiern dürfen. Und ich glaube, wir müssen nach wie vor daran festhalten, weil so viel an diesem Krieg Russlands gegen die Ukraine hängt. Hybride Angriffe sind bereits erwähnt worden. Ich will auch noch mal deutlich machen, wie wichtig es ist, zu betonen, dass wir auch jede Form der Destabilisierung durch die Benutzung und den Missbrauch von Migration benutzen. Dies gilt im Übrigen auch für den Co-Aggressor Belarus. Diese Destabilisierung führt in unseren Ländern dazu, dass es einen Aufstieg von Populisten gibt, den wir zur Rettung unserer Demokratie ebenfalls zurückweisen müssen. Es ist ein Angriff auf unsere Freiheitsrechte. Lassen Sie mich aber auch betonen, dass auch mir wichtig ist, welche zivilen Opfer es gibt, aber nicht nur diese. Auch Soldaten leiden in diesem Krieg extrem. Ich will darauf hinweisen, das ist ein Thema, was wir nicht vernachlässigen dürfen, dass viele dieser Soldaten, auch wenn der Krieg eines Tages zu Ende sein sollte, was ich sehr hoffe, und zwar möglichst rasch, dass diese unter posttraumatischen Belastungsstörungen leiden. Und ich möchte gerne, dass dies auch stärker betont wird. Eben diese Belastungsstörungen führen zu häuslicher Gewalt. Und damit, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, sind wir auch bei dem Thema der Gender-Based Violence, die wir ernst nehmen müssen, weil darunter auch die Frauen leiden, aber auch deren Kinder. Das ist für mich ausgesprochen wichtig. Gleichwohl dürfen wir nicht vernachlässigen, dass es weitere Konfliktregionen gibt. Sie haben dankenswerterweise auch den Konflikt in Gaza angesprochen. Auch im Westjordanland gibt es Unruhen. Der gesamte mediterrane Raum, und das habe ich mir als Vorsitzende der Migrationskommission zur Aufgabe gemacht, benötigt mehr Aufmerksamkeit. Sie haben gestern schon gehört, dass Italien und die Türkei im Fokus unserer Aufmerksamkeit stehen. Dies sollten wir weiter fortsetzen. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Potarayev to be followed by, of Ukraine, to be followed by Ms. Karlamidis from Cyprus. Mr. Potarayev, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you, Tobias, for very powerful and strong report. I would like to stress on several principal things. First of all, we all have to understand that Russia does not show any signs of readiness to abandon its aggression against our country, which it has been conducting for more than 10 years. We see all these clear indications that Russia is not interested in conducting full-fledged peace negotiations. Under false calls for peace, the Russian leadership seeks a tactical pause to strengthen its control over the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine, delay or prevent partner states from providing further defense assistance to Ukraine, and regroup for the next attacks. But we, as you know, always, for all these 10 years, said that Ukraine seeks peace. We are not warmongers in Ukraine. And all our efforts here in this organization, all our efforts during the first peace summit shows our intention to reach stability and peace for our country and for the whole Europe and whole world. We would like to explain our position regarding other peaceful initiatives that some countries are proposing. We welcome any proposals aimed at the restoration of just peace for Ukraine, but we proceed from the position that such proposals must be based on two main elements. First, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And second, these proposals should be based on the UN Charter and on the UN General Assembly resolution principles of the Charter of the United Nations underlying comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and include respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within internationally recognized borders. We are confident that such peace ideas could be discussed on different international platforms like our organization, first of all, like Peace Summit. We are confident that there will be other peace summits with the involvement of more countries. And we are sure that, of course, strengthening military potential of Ukraine, strengthening our potential to defend ourselves, but also putting our efforts to build new architecture of security for all world and for Europe, we can reach together perfect results and stop the aggressor in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Ms. Karlamidis from Cyprus to be followed by Mr. Wicker of the United States. Ms. Karlamidis, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hear many of you speaking about Russia and Ukraine. I didn't hear any of you speaking about Israel. The war in Gaza started on the 7th of October. I was the first one in my country to support and stand by the Israelis' right to respond to Hamas' brutal attack against the Israeli people. But let's see what happened within the last 10 months. 10 months of war, 36,000 deaths, 2 million of people starving, demolition of Gaza Strip, hostages, Israeli hostages in Hamas' hands, and Netanyahu doesn't bother to bring the hostages home. That's why 150,000 Israelis were demonstrating in Tel Aviv the other day. Thousands of people away from their homes in Israeli-Lebanon border, instability of the region, and my small country, Cyprus, is in the middle of all this chaos. Now Netanyahu is threatening of invading in Lebanon. There will be chaos and collapsing of Lebanon. There will be a huge instability of the region. Other countries will be involved, Iran and Syria. Economic consequences for the whole world. Millions of refugees, immigrants from Middle East to Europe. There will be enormous consequences for Europe as well. Now, Netanyahu needs to keep himself in power. That's why he's looking one conflict after the other. He's done with Hamas, but now he wants to invade Lebanon. Unless he does that, he cannot remain in power. Will we leave one man to drag humanity into such a disastrous? The moderate people left his government. He and the Orthodox are running the show at the moment. Netanyahu tries to avoid isolation. That's why he implicates my country by publicizing targets in Cyprus in order to provoke Nasrallah. So, what we have to do is pressure to stop Netanyahu. Netanyahu cares only about being in power. He doesn't care about his people. He doesn't care about anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Wicker from the United States, followed by Mr. Samharadze of Georgia. Mr. Wicker, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we delegates know, this resolution is about the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine. To the extent that my friend from Cyprus just now mentioned what's going on in the Middle East, I will say that it is correct to point out that actually what's going on in the world is being done by an axis of aggression, which includes Russia, which includes the People's Republic of China, as well as North Korea, and Iran, and the illegal proxies, the terrorist groups of Iran, which have brought about the suffering that my friend from Cyprus has mentioned. And so I have begun to talk in my country about the axis of aggression, and I'm glad that the resolution, the very excellent resolution by my friend from Germany, mentions the far-reaching effects of the Russian invasion. The axis of aggression involves also Belarus. The axis of aggression affects the safety of Moldova and Transnistria, as we've debated this morning and yesterday afternoon. A further amendment, number 12 by Mr. Barna, will strengthen this. The United States delegation has amendments number 6 and 7 mentioning the effect of the illegal axis of aggression on our friends in Georgia, in the regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The draft delegation is correct to mention the Arctic and the high north. Now, I want to take a moment, and I don't know if I can do it in 52 seconds. Many of my fellow delegates have come up to us, the members of the United States delegation, and asked what this election is going to mean for the United States support for Ukraine and for resisting the aggression there. Let me say, I'm not delighted with what our Democratic administration, the Biden administration has done, what I view as the slow walking of vital ammunition and weaponry to assist our Ukrainian friends. I'm not delighted by what some politicians in my party say about perhaps withholding NATO support until other NATO members step up. I will simply observe this, and I hope my colleagues will indulge me. NATO is stronger. More countries in NATO are giving the 2%. We need to do more of that. I think the citizens of the United States appreciate that we are in on this. They appreciate that a safer world in Asia, a safer world in the Middle East, results if Vladimir Putin is completely run out of Ukraine. That should be our goal, and that's the reason I appreciate paragraph 40 so much of our draft resolution, because it says Russia must leave every bit of the occupied regions of Ukraine. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wicker. I will now recognize Mr. Samharadze from Georgia, to be followed by Mr. Yorchishin from Ukraine. Mr. Samharadze, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to congratulate the rapporteur for a very good report and thank him for reflecting properly Georgia's Russian occupation of Georgia's regions in the report. Last month, we celebrated 33rd year of restoration of Georgia's independence, and 32 years out of those 33 have been under occupation. Our journey has not been without its challenges. We faced the harsh realities of wars and conflicts, including 3 wars with the Russian Federation, which have resulted in the occupation of 20% of our territory. We have long understood the nature of the threat posed by Russia and the lengths to which it will go to achieve its ambitions at the expense of its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity. Despite these adversities, we our resolve remains unshaken. When I speak about occupation, occupation is not just a legal term. That, by the way, many countries in this room are not using in their official documents with regards to Abkhazia and Tskhin Valley region. Occupation has its daily effects on Georgian population. We face kidnappings at the occupation line almost on a weekly basis. Georgian children are deprived of instruction in their native language in occupied territories. Georgian cultural traces are erased in the occupied regions, and almost 300,000 people, that's 8% of Georgia's population, cannot go back to their homes because of occupation for the last 30 years. We have been engaged in Geneva International Dialogue with OSCE being one of the co-chairs of the dialogue, together with the European Union and the United Nations, and Georgia and United States and Russia as participants. But in the last 16 years, we have not achieved any progress in this regard. And I question here what international organizations are doing in order to solve the conflict. And then, the result is that Russia gets encouraged, and then they attack another neighboring country, Ukraine. They might attack another one in the future. So we have to pay attention to this malign activities of Russians right from the beginning, and not when the occupation is already there. This is the unfortunate reality that we have to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will be closing the speakers list in 5 minutes. I want to give a warning that we will be closing the speakers list. If you wish to be added, please do so now. I will now recognize Mr. Yorchishin from Ukraine, to be followed by Ms. Lopez of Andorra. Mr. Yorchishin, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thanks a lot. It's a great report, and I, as a head of Committee for Freedom of Speech in our parliament, thanks for position about cyber crimes, hybrid war in information sphere. Now we understand how dangerous is Russia media, so-called media. It's a pity that not in all countries Russia channels, TV channels are closed. We do need close this propaganda machine around the world, but still, in time of social networks, in time of TikTok, Telegram, we understand how serious is attacking through information mechanism, through using mass media, not as in traditional for democracy goals, but just for manipulation. And we propose, head of our committee, Nikita Paturaev, propose create something like information Rammstein, united our sources to fight our population all OSCE country against Russia propaganda, because evil which not punished traditionally return more stronger. We do understand then reaction of freedom of free world for occupation of Transnistria or attacking of Georgia was more active in time. Maybe we don't have occupied territory in Ukraine. If we punished, if we banning all Russia information sources around the world, Russia don't have possibility to manipulate so effectively. Maybe result of far rights or far left party even in election for European Parliament will be not so high if Russia don't have this soft power. So thanks reporter to state that it's a problem, but we do need a solution. So we must be united as a representative of free world and fight with Russia manipulation, with disinformation, even through the social media, and first of all through the social media. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Ms. Lopez of Andorra to be followed by Ms. Minyasan from Armenia. Ms. Lopez, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to express my firm support towards Ukraine in the face of Russia's war of aggression, which constitutes a violation of the Charter of the United Nations and the Helsinki Final Act, as well as the international humanitarian law. Accountability and justice is needed in this conflict in order to preserve human rights and restore peace in Ukraine. The current situation in Ukraine is unacceptable and threatens stability in the region. Andorra keeps working in a program to support Ukrainian refugees, providing housing and employment. Additionally, we have recently started a project to fund the reconstruction of schools in Ukraine. It is crucial that all of us provide all resources at our hands to keep supporting Ukraine and its population in this cruel war of aggression. We must stand together in this war of aggression in favor of accountability and justice, as well as provide the support to ensure resilience of the Ukrainian population. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Ms. Minasyan from Armenia to be followed by Mr. Coles from Latvia. Ms. Minasyan, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, let me tell you about the latest developments in Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. In April, Armenia and Azerbaijan finally started the border delimitation process based on the Almaty Declaration, which was welcomed by many countries and international organizations, including the European Union. The Republic of Armenia recognizes the territorial integrity and inviolability of the borders of all its neighbors. Armenia and Azerbaijan on the highest level agreed that they mutually recognize the territorial integrity and sovereignty of each other based on the Almaty Declaration. The Republic of Armenia is loyal to this principle and does not have any ambitions beyond its internationally recognized 29,743 square kilometers. Armenia has practically proven this approach by the initiative of conducting delimitation between the 4 villages of the Kazakh region of Azerbaijan and Tavush region of Armenia. For the first time in the period of independent statehood, the 20-kilometer area of the Armenia-Azerbaijan border is demarcated. Parallelly, the parties agreed to complete the alignment of the draft regulation on the Commission on Delimitation and Border Security of the Armenia and Azerbaijan in upcoming days. We hope that the demarcation process along the entire border will be continuous and all problematic issues will be resolved through peaceful negotiations. Based on the fact that it is the will of Armenia not to allow tension, we have also offered to create a bilateral Armenia-Azerbaijan committee to address all reports of ceasefire violations. We hope to receive a positive response from colleagues from Azerbaijan in this initiative. Dear attendees, Armenia reaffirmed its commitment to the lasting stable peace in South Caucasus based on mutual recognition of territorial integrity, the delimitation of the state border in the line with the Almaty Declaration, as well as the unblocking of communications under the sovereignty and jurisdiction of 2 states based on the principles of equality and reciprocity. We believe the OSCE has an important role to play in contributing to the democratic security of Europe. We value your contribution to the peace and stability of the region and expect your continued involvement in the settlement of Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Coles from Latvia to be followed by Mr. Sinikis from Cyprus. Mr. Coles, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Winkler, for, I would say, in large lines, well-balanced resolution, a draft resolution. Just a few points I want to come back to. My dear colleague from U.S. Senate, Senator Wicker, what he raised. So we do talk about Ukraine, we talk about Middle East, but what we have to register here at the OSCE and actually reflect in our reports as well, that the Russia's war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East are not isolated conflicts. The perpetrators are actually creating strategic partnerships. That is Russia, Iran, vis-a-vis also the North Korea. And on top of that, we have the huge shadow of China as well, lurking over these conflicts. So of course, I very much welcome what is being reflected in the report, but I also would like to raise other proxies that are destabilizing the situation both in the Middle East but globally. For example, Houthis blocking the Red Sea, the freedom of navigation through the seas as well. That should be also reflected in our report as such. And when it comes to Africa, as you know, last year in Vancouver, we adopted the declaration in which we recognized Wagner Group as a terrorist entity, organization, that should be reflected as well in this report, because the main destabilizer in the African continent is Russia through its controlled Wagner Group. That is actually Russia's military entity. Last but not least, I also wanted to raise two more questions in relation. We reflect on the so-called elections in Russia. I actually invite to recognize Mr. Putin as illegitimate president of Russia, similarly as this House has done towards Lukashenko, the tyrant of Belarus. The same thing has been done at the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, and they invite other institutions, democratic institutions, to follow their suit. So that will be also another recommendation. Since this is my last meeting at the OSCE PA, I will be leaving for the European Parliament. And we all recall, Mr. Chair, as well, my first meeting here at OSCE PA in Vienna, 2023. I really just want to pay attention that there's a news coming from Russia that in June, the Federal Council, together with State Duma, they're drafting resolution and soon to be adopted in State Duma to suspend their participation at the OSCE PA. I think what we adopted yesterday, the resolution, the supplementary item on Ukraine, where we actually ask for OSCE PA find the mechanisms to suspend the countries that are in gross violation of our principles of this institution, we should include the paragraph that we welcome the decision or the initiative being put forward by the Federal Council and the State Duma of Russian Federation to suspend their participation in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coles, and we wish you well in the European Parliament. You will be missed as a participant in this assembly. Mr. Sinekis is not here, and so the chair will now recognize Mr. Mediu of Albania to be followed by Mr. Wilson of the United States. Mr. Mediu, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Security of Europe depends on the support of Ukraine, but I can agree more with Senator Wicker that we are talking about the axis of threat, and it's not just Russia. We should think a little bit more about what China is doing through their way and soft power, what Iran is doing in Europe to threaten our security, privacy of our citizens, and security of our countries. I just want to bring some facts about Iranian intelligence trying to work with organized crime groups in order to fuel instability in the Balkan region and Southeast Europe, as well the cyber attacks that my country had from Iran for many, many months. Chairman, you mentioned hybrid war against Moldova and Georgia. Please, let's also focus on the Balkans. That can be another potential point of conflict through proxy governments. If you'll see closely what's going on in the Balkans, the money that are spent for defense without really, matching the economic, perspective of some countries, and also supported by China and Russia, it presents a real threat for stability. Situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the secession of Republika Srpska, can create a domino effect of instability. The armed conflict organized in northern Kosovo, the fueling of religion conflicts and political conflicts in Montenegro, and also, as I mentioned, cyber attacks from Iran toward Albania. So this is a region that I think needs more attention. But as I speak about the outside threats, let me just bring in also some discussion what is another real threat for our countries. Another real threat for our countries is organized crime and corruption. Organized crime and corruption and authoritarian leadership sometimes, which follows in the path of Putin. We should ensure democracy in our countries based on free and fair election. And that's where it starts, with the organized crime in vote buying, voter intimidation, and not free and fair election. So as OSCE stands for free and fair election, I'll ask more attention about the region, the standards of the election, and respect of human rights and freedoms of our own citizens, because this is also a very, very concerning and very big threat to our stability in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Wilson of the United States to be followed by Mr. Ganjaliyev from Azerbaijan. Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Richard Hudson and Rapporteur Tobias Winkler. Fellow colleagues, the United States stands firmly with Ukraine in its existential fight against war criminal Putin's unprovoked, murderous invasion. The U.S. Congress voted again this week, overwhelmingly, Republicans and Democrats, to support the people of Ukraine. This follows the bipartisan approval this year of around $60 billion in Ukrainian aid, the most ever for a country in such a circumstance. This backs up actually what President Donald Trump achieved earlier, in that he tried to avoid this by providing Javelin missiles to the people of Ukraine. President Trump put American troops for the first time in history in Poland. Additionally, President Trump helped lead the effort to block Nord Stream 2. And so this has been a really bipartisan situation. And democracies must support Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, ensuring they have the resources necessary to defend their people and reclaim their homeland. We sadly are in a conflict that we did not choose, of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. Senator Wicker is absolutely correct. It's an axis of aggression. Putin, the Chinese Communist Party, the regime in Tehran, and the regime in Pyongyang. Additionally, our Albanian delegation has been correct in the identification of an axis of aggression. We call on the Assembly to support President Zelensky's comprehensive 10-point peace plan as a foundation for negotiations. This plan offers a path to a just and lasting peace, aligning with international law and principles. In addition, we must be willing and prepared to support Ukrainian security for the long term in a concrete and effective way, and contain Russian aggression there and across the OSCE region to reestablish peace through strength. It is imperative to hold the Russian Federation accountable for war crimes in Ukraine through international monitoring mechanisms. Justice for victims is non-negotiable, and we must support efforts to document and to prosecute these heinous acts, as Rapporteur Tobias Winkler has been so successfully promoting in Nuremberg. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The chair will now recognize Mr. Ganjaliyev from Azerbaijan to be followed by Ms. Gerashenko from Ukraine. Mr. Ganjaliyev, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. With the full restoration of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan in September 2023, in full conformity with the UN Charter and international law, a historic opportunity has emerged for Azerbaijan and Armenia to establish good neighborly relations and bring much needed peace and prosperity to the region based on mutual recognition and respect for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. But it also depends, however, on reaffirmation by Armenia of its respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, not only in words, but in actions, including by abandoning territorial claims against Azerbaijan that are still embedded in its constitution and other legislative documents. So it means that Armenia must reconsider its constitution in order to remove the territorial claim against its neighbors, which will positively contribute to the peace in the region and will help to bring closer our relations in the process of normalization period. Dear colleagues, I also think that as a member of Azerbaijani parliament, it is my firm belief that Armenia must understand that peace and security in the region depend, again, on good neighborly relations with its neighbors, because without good neighborly relations, it is impossible to speak about peaceful coexistence as nations, as countries in the South Caucasus. In the recent progress on the normalization of relations, including a peace treaty and delimitation and demarcation of the section of the border between the two states, and the return of 4 villages to Azerbaijan, demonstrates that progress is possible with direct bilateral negotiations. So it is again very important to have direct bilateral negotiations without any preconditions, which are the most important aspects of the normalization of the relations between our countries. I thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ms. Gerashenko from Ukraine to be followed by Mr. Handanyan from Armenia. Ms. Gerashenko, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you to Romania for hosting this parliamentary assembly session without the participation of the Russian and Belarusian delegation. There are far sanctions for supporting the war. The front line remain very a challenge. Due to the 6-month delay in American military aid, Russia has resumed its offensives and increased its capabilities. Russia holds an advantage in the air, drones, and electronic warfare system. It uses guided bombs against Kharkiv and other cities, turning them into another Aleppo. Russia is ramping up military support from Iran, China, and North Korea. Russia, unfortunately, deliberately destroys Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Currently, 16% of Ukraine's power generation capacity is destroyed. In Kyiv, we are already facing daily outage of 5-10 hours. Ukraine will face a very hard winter. Energy destroying is a continual genocide practice against Ukraine. Russian aggression has triggered in large immigration in Europe since World War II. And now, unfortunately, Russia will be organized a new way of migration. Russia holds 10 of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilian captives. Among them are 26 journalists that are not been included to the unchanged list. And now Russia blocked the Red Cross access to detention site. I have been involved in the prison exchange and can confirm that Russia subject all detained to torture sexual violations. I think it's very important, it is vital to strengthen sanctions, stop all export of energy, metals from Russia, and close of sanction evasion routes and military supply chain. Our organization should also take a strong stance in condemning Russia war crimes and genocide against Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Handanyan, from Armenia, to be followed by Mr. Morley from Norway. Mr. Handanyan, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me thank Tobias Winkler for doing outstanding job drafting this report and resolution, despite the limited time. It is both comprehensive and addresses the pressing security challenges in our region. The draft resolution is also addresses the current security and political situation in the South Caucasus, specifically the peace negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I was planning to talk about the aspirations towards peace that Armenia has, And as my colleague said, that Armenia stands ready to sign a comprehensive and sustainable peace agreement with Azerbaijan based on mutual recognition of each other's territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders, and the principle of non-use of force in the spirit of the Helsinki Final Act. Moreover, recently the Armenian government expressed its readiness to sign the peace treaty within the upcoming month based on the principles that I mentioned above. But this proposal of the Armenian government was met exactly by the same demand that was just voiced by the colleague from Azerbaijan, who was talking about the constitution of Armenia. The negotiated peace agreement clearly states that the parties recognize each other's territorial integrity and do not have claims against each other. There is also a great provision in the draft peace agreement that neither party may invoke its domestic legislation for not implementing its obligations under the peace agreement, which is also a very well-known principle of international law. And this kind of rhetoric and demands, I find this as a clear intervention in the domestic politics of Armenia and internal affairs of Armenia, which is unacceptable. And here I would like to quote paragraph 45 of the draft resolution. The Assembly welcomes diplomatic efforts by the international community aimed at facilitating dialogue conducted in good faith, as well as other efforts dedicated to build confidence and trust between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Dear colleagues, your engagement is crucial. Your attention to the region is key for stability, because when you overlook this region, other actors who are not necessarily interested in peace and stability activate their malign influence. This deteriorates the security situation in the region and poses serious threats to the democratic aspirations of my country, its independence and sovereignty. And my message that I bring from my country to you, to the international community, is be engaged and do not overlook our region. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Maura Lee of Norway to be followed by Mr. Otunç from Turkey. You are recognized for 3 minutes, Mr. Morley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much to the rapporteur for a very good draft resolution. Vielen Dank, Herr Winkler. We are living in challenging times when it comes to security. Russia's aggression affects all of us. I'm from Norway. We are a neighboring country to Russia, and we are, of course, afraid of what's now happening. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure visiting our colleagues in the Ukrainian parliament in Kyiv, and I'll say to the Ukrainian delegation, we support you. Your fight is our fight. Your war is our war. We'll support you politically, financially, and militarily. We are together with you. But good friends, let's not create new problems and conflicts that don't exist. That will take me to paragraph 23 in the draft resolution. And let me quote, expressing concern about the growing risk of geopolitical tensions and territorial claims. Ladies and gentlemen, there are, except for one discussion between United States and Canada about the border in the Beaufort Sea, there are no conflicts about the borders in the Arctic. Compared to, for example, the South China Ocean, the discussions about the borders in the high north are solved. Norway and Russia, we had a disputed area, but we solved that conflict 12, 15 years ago. So this is not a big problem, and I think United States and Canada, they will find a solution about the borders in the Beaufort Sea. They are both members of the OSCE, they are both members of NATO, they are very good friends. This is not a big problem. So, Mr. Chairman, I will propose we delete the 3 words "and territorial claims." So the beginning of the paragraph 23 should be expressing concern about the growing risk of geopolitical tensions in the Arctic and High North. I really hope the rapporteur will consider this proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize Mr. Öztunç from Turkey, and then we'll be followed by Ms. Bokachava from Georgia. Mr. Öztunç, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Distinguished Chairman, our MP will deliver his speech in Turkish, and we will obey the time limitation, and there's going to be a consecutive English interpretation for your information.
Evet, teşekkürler Sayın Başkan. Ukrayna'da soykırım yapılıyor, evet, doğru. Ama soykırım sadece Ukrayna'da yok, aynı zamanda Gazze'de de soykırım var. Ukrayna'da ölen çocuklar için üzülüyoruz, gözyaşı döküyoruz, canımız yanıyor. Peki Gazze'de ölen çocuklar için de üzülmemiz gerekmiyor mu Sayın Başkan? Binlerce çocuk Gazze'de sınırda açlıkla karşı karşıya bugün. Ve 2 gündür burada Ukrayna konuşuluyor sadece. Belli ki Filistin, Gazze, Agitpa'nın çok da umurunda değil. Eğer çocuklar arasında ayrım yaparsak insanlığımızı yitirmiş oluruz. Eğer çocuklar arasında ayrım yapmazsak o zaman dünyaya barış gelir diyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Well, distinguished Chairman, thank you very much. Well, it is correct that there is genocide perpetrated in Ukraine, but there is also genocide taking place in Gaza. We are crying and we are upset for the Ukrainian children, of course, who are losing their lives or who are being kidnapped. But don't you think that we should also be upset and crying for the children in Gaza, because more than thousands of children are facing with starvation in Gaza. For the last 2 days, this dire situation in Ukraine is being discussed here, but don't you think that it is also under the responsibility of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to discuss the dire situation that is taking place in Gaza? If we show discrimination among children, then it means that we will lose our humanity. But if we do not show discrimination among children of different countries, then we can bring peace and hope to the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ms. Bokachava from Georgia. You're recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to commend the work of the rapporteur for this important resolution. Vielen Dank, Herr Winkler, für diesen wichtigen Beschluss. I would like to express my full support to Ukraine that is fighting to defend not only its freedom, but our freedom as well. I would also like to thank the rapporteur for highlighting the ongoing occupation of the Georgian regions of Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region, South Ossetia, continuing to violate Georgia's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We also welcome the addition of language suggested by the United States, Finnish, Swedish, and Ukrainian delegations, stressing that any alternative formats supported by the Russian Federation that might be conceived as alternatives to the Geneva International format would only serve to strengthen Russian influence and must be condemned. Equally important, however, is to acknowledge that the threats of Russian malign influence in Georgia also stem from within, from an increasingly authoritarian, anti-European, anti-Western government led by the Russian-made billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili. The recent adoption of the Kremlin-inspired foreign agents law, accompanied by brutal violence against opposition, against civil society activists, journalists, and peaceful protesters, is but one expression of the shift of Georgia's current government away from the Euro-Atlantic path chosen by the Georgian people. We therefore welcome and stress the importance of adding the amendments to the resolution condemning the adoption of the Russian law by the Georgian ruling party as an attempt to derail Georgia's Euro-Atlantic choice. It is imperative that the international community stand by the Georgian people in our defense of our path towards the European Union and NATO. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating in the debate on the draft resolution. At this point, the chair would like to offer the rapporteur an opportunity to briefly respond to the debate. Mr. Winkler, you're recognized.
Dear Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you for this discussion and the support of the core of the draft resolution. The priorities seem to be shared by almost all of you. And of course, additional focus on special views are welcomed, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and votes on the amendments tomorrow in this constructive atmosphere that reflects our will to stand together in our fight for the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. Given the time, I will close our committee meeting for this morning, and we'll begin consideration of amendments to the draft resolution tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The committee stands adjourned.